welcome to the first episode of Oops All Dragons.
Okay, that's a working title.
Okay, we're just going with it. Stream of consciousness here.
Yep. Oops All Dragons. That's
It'll
what it is for
make
now.
a lot more sense with the cover art that we're totally gonna have.
We're definitely gonna do that. My name is Lisa. Hello.
My name is Varun, and don't go by our accents. Neither one of us are actually from the United States originally. And now we sit squarely in the contiguous 48 states. And we're bringing you our thoughts on Dungeons & Dragons and nerd stuff.
Wait, you're telling me that there are nerds who are not just white men? That's crazy.
I mean, they're out there. There's some of them around, but, there are other folks, too.
The truth is out there. So what gives you the authority to tell anybody about Dungeons & Dragons?
Because I have a microphone and a connection to the internet, and I've played the game.
That's all it takes to have an opinion on the internet these days, huh?
Yep. Rolling with it.
No, but really, give me your resume.
My resume, my D&D resume.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've played D&D since 2015. Been almost forever Dungeon Master until very recently.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And then I think this is going to come up as a thing that you and I will talk about, of the intersection of game and art that comes up with D&D and other things. Like, I was definitely heavy gamer before that, a lot of video games.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about the influences.
Yeah.
And the neat crossroads that D&D sits on of all the different kinds of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. I think that's our
platforms.
aim with this, at least in the beginning.
We're gonna get real philosophical about D&D. I don't know if you clicked on this because you wanted to hear some people playing Dungeons & Dragons. Psych. Nope, that's not it. That's not what we're doing.
Nope.
We're gonna
We're
gonna be even nerdier than the nerds who just play Dungeons & Dragons. We're gonna get philosophical
and
academical about the work of Gary Gygax and everything thereafter.
So that's me. What about you, Lisa?
I'm a card-carrying high fantasy nerd.
I thought you were going to say a card-carrying theater kid.
Well, that too. It's a bundle. Comes as a bundle. It was on sale. Buy one, get one. I grew up reading and watching and being fascinated by anything that has dragons in it, and then one day I heard about a game called Dungeons & Dragons, and it had like a weird history, and people in the 80s thought it had to do with Satan, and I'm like, what is this? I'm interested in this. And then it wasn't until 3 years ago now that I actually was able to start playing it. So that was in like 2017, 2018. I don't know time anymore.
We are recording in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, no, time is not real. Yeah, for those in the future, how's it going?
If this is the only thing that survives.
Oh,
boy.
No, this won't be the only thing that survives. Oh, boy. Could you imagine? That'd be wild.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've been playing for a few years now. I came into it sort of with the wave of people that came into it because of people starting to play inspired by people playing on like live streams and Twitch. I'm talking about Critical Role, McCree's D&D podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I came in sort of with that crowd, and I took to it like a fish takes to water.
You did, which is going to be fun to talk about.
I mean, it's just natural because like you said, I'm a card-carrying theater kid. I used to like write mini fantasy stories with my friends. Like it makes sense. It feels right. It's natural. Yeah, basically, just giant nerd.
Yeah, and we'll kind of focus things on Dungeons and Dragons because, especially 5th edition, because that's the modern kind of most ubiquitous tabletop RPG. But we might go into other stuff. I've done a lot of Pathfinder. I've done some of the Star Wars Fantasy Flight role-playing games.
Maybe someday this podcast will be the reason that I finally get people together and get myself together to play Vampire the Masquerade. Ooh, I want to do that so.
You just want the book. I just want
the book. I want an excuse to buy that giant tome.
You can just buy it to have it.
I mean, yes, but also I need to justify it.
Okay. I'll play. I've never played in that system, and I don't know, vampires, fun.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be fun. But the requirement is that you have to like dress up. I'm not playing it without the theatrics. I need the theatrics. I need the drama.
Okay. So.
And I mean, if we want to get into it, 5e, 5th edition. It's kind of, I mean, if we're talking about like things that made D&D more accessible and brought a lot of people into the game and kind of, it's part of the reason that it's exploded in recent years, is 5th edition, which, as far as I know, based on like things I've heard, things I've read, what I understand about previous editions, it's the most accessible and the most conducive for the sort of like
it's the
creative
lowest bar to entry.
Yeah, it's the most like conducive to like the creative aspects of D&D.
Not derisive of that. I love the fact that 5th edition is way more simplified than 3rd edition or 4th edition that I've played. I've seen some 2nd edition with some folks that I know, and figuring out things like THAC0 and all of that other stuff. They're like, no, not for me. They love it. That's their thing. Not gonna judge. But 5th edition, after playing all the other systems I've played, the most conducive for the dungeon master not pulling out his hair, and the players pretty quickly picking up on what their characters can and can't do, and how their stuff works, getting all of the game stuff to the lowest level so that the role play can actually like happen.
Yeah, it very much I think the idea with 5th edition was to underline the part of tabletop role-playing game.
The RP version,
the role-playing
the RP and the RPG
part, yes. And eventually I do want to like get we have some acquaintances who have experience with like
stories.
Even earlier editions and offshoots like Dungeon World, and I want to get their opinion.
Yeah. And I guess we should talk, before we dig into like D&D topics, D&D 101 as we call it. The goal of this podcast, beyond us just talking about nerd stuff, is one, giving our opinions, because we love our opinions, and
yeah, we have a lot of them.
I think this really came about because you and I just got together after sessions at certain points and just talked about the game, and then it would quickly move from game mechanic discussions to like, I almost introduced colonialism into my Dungeons & Dragons game, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Oh, I definitely introduced colonialism into my Dungeons & Dragons game, and I feel great about it. We'll talk
about spontaneous colonialism. Beyond just us, we also want this to be a place where our friends can come and talk about like their experiences, their stories. I think the best like rebuke to the Mercer effect, which is again something we're going to talk about, probably not this session, but some other time, was why do people care so much about crafting stories for people who are going to be sitting at a table. Like 6 people are ever going to know this story. So I want to do the inverse of that. Get some of our friends or acquaintances from like our gaming places to talk about their experiences, because they have Dungeon Dragon stories which are great, which are awesome, that again 6 people in the world will ever know. So hey, let's try to put them here and see if people like them.
Yeah, it's a place to share the things that otherwise would stay between you and the people who are at that table.
Yeah.
And also whoever else you torture when you go home after a game and are like, hey, do you want to hear about something you definitely don't care about? Doesn't matter. I'm about to launch into a 2-hour rant about what just happened during my D&D game.
Yep.
Oh, boy.
So that's one of our other aims, again, for another episode later on, which we are already planning to do. But this session, we're going to talk about Dungeon Dragons 101.
Episode? Session? Episode?
I keep calling it sessions because, like, we're already in D&D mode, so I call every instance a session. Episode. Yeah. I got to correct myself there. But we're going to go through, like, a list of topics that you and I have both talked to groups of people about before. About just kind of the general meat and potatoes of Dungeons & Dragons, but we can get into some of the stories we have around that stuff, and whether we like some of the things like challenge rating or alignment and all that type of stuff, and do we find it useful or not. And hopefully, at least maybe aspiring dungeon masters or players can listen and hear where we're coming from, and maybe something we'll spark something in someone.
Yeah, I think at least like for the first couple of episodes, I think what we should talk about, we're going to talk about, it's inevitable, is like the things that might seem like intimidating about the game. Mm-hmm. And I think I want to start with, like, from the perspective of a player, what are the things that might seem intimidating about the game, and sort of like breaking that down, and I want to talk about just how much easier this game is to get into than it seems.
Okay. Do you want to start there? Because the first thing I had was DM-centric, but if you want to start from the player side, that's fine too.
Yeah, because, I mean, the DM thing, I think to be able to get to the DM stuff, you have to understand some of the player side stuff first. Mm-hmm. So I think let's start from there. So, playing the game. Somebody comes up to you, or you just wake up one day and you're like, I would like to play D&D. Or somebody comes up to you and is like, would you like to play Dungeons and Dragons? And you think, yes, but where do I start? Mm-hmm. It seems so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Like, do I have to read all of those source books? All the rule books? Do I need to know everything before I can even start? The short answer is no. The long answer is skim it.
Alright, so yes. And this is coming from me. My first real TRPG experience was playing late stage Pathfinder version, 1, before 5e came out, where there's a ton of rulebooks and expansions, not all of them designed for game balance, just a bunch of races and classes and items and all these other things that can optimize your build. Pathfinder's really big on optimizing your build, which is not the point, but I don't want to go off on that right now. The bar to entry there was super high. I'm kind of lucky that I had a group that was willing to kind of walk me through, because they had played before, to walk me through the character creation, how it works. Got some good habits and bad habits from there, in seeing what they taught me in retrospect. 5e specifically. Other systems as well. You don't need to really know the whole book, know all the rules, know how every class works. Most people don't know any of that stuff. I've been a dungeon master for years at this point, and I still haven't played like a magic class for any extended period of time. So yeah, if it comes to like magic rules or something, I don't know. I have to look it up. But I don't feel like I can't play a magic class if it ever came up. Like in the next game, or if my character dies in one of these games I'm playing in, I think I'll go to the magic class next, because I just never really got the chance to.
Yeah, ease your way into it.
Yeah,
be a paladin.
I think the innocence and the wonder we have when we see, like, oh my god, I can be a monk. Oh my god, I can be a wizard. And you can do all these crazy things. That goes away when you have the knowledge of the rules, but it's something that's there. It's part and parcel with that, like, that feeling of, oh my god, there's so much I need to know, because there's so much you want to know. For those players who are still somehow in 2020 not afraid, I guess is the best word to say it, afraid of jumping in or something, if you have a group who wants to play, or a dungeon master asking you to play, and your only apprehension is, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be good enough, just go. No one's good at D&D.
There's that's a big thing, is there's no such thing as being good or being bad at. Well, no, that's a lie, but we'll get into that.
There are people.
But I mean, it is very difficult to. Yeah, it is. Unless you're a shitty person, and I guess I'm deciding that we can semi-swear in this now. But unless you're like an actual bad person, you can't be bad at D&D.
I maybe not posing it as like being a bad person, but bringing bad real world
habits
and behaviors into a fantasy game where you're assuming there are no consequences. Just like...
Yeah, I mean, D&D is the game of consequences.
Yeah.
So if you're not suffering the consequences of your bad behavior in real life, who, boy, are you ever... I mean, at least considering if you have a good DM, you're gonna suffer the consequences of your terrible behavior in the game. Like, I've encountered players who, at the end of a session, feel like, oh, I did a bad job, and it's like, you can't... You're a nice person, you get along with everybody at the table, you do your best to, like, understand at least how to play your character mechanically. If you're quiet during a session, that doesn't mean that you failed at the game, that doesn't mean that you are a bad player, this means you're shy. You're fine. Relax. It's not that serious, it is a game.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, you're sitting at a table, or you're on a call, because nobody sits at a table anymore in the middle of 2020, but, you're on a video call, or at a table, you're amongst people who are your peers, and who have all agreed to play this game together, and it's an endeavor that you're taking on together. No one is sitting there isolated on their own. That's kind of the point. It's a group activity.
Yeah,
so
even in situations where you're on your own, but you're going to like a gaming store again, when those open up and become a thing again, you're playing with a bunch of random folk, you shouldn't feel that you can't ask questions. Yeah. Of the DM or the other players, to kind of get a feel of the group, or get a feel of the rules or the games, or, if you don't know something, ask. That's what the Dungeon Master's there for. It shouldn't be the sole thing that they're doing, telling everyone how to play, but if you're not sure
they should be
how
prepared to do it, though.
Yeah.
Because I'm of the opinion that, like, I mean, it's an objective true fact that everyone at some point was new to the game. Mm-hmm. Everybody at some point played the game for the first time. And everyone, I think, if you sit at a table at a game store, or you join in on a game on Roll20, and it's with people that you don't necessarily know, if those people don't understand that, like, you might be a new player and don't try to help you, maybe that's not a game that you should... that particular table is not really for you.
Yeah.
Because it's not difficult to find people who are very welcoming and will, like, hold your hand and,
help you grow
and help you figure it out until you can get your sea legs. But inevitably, as with anything, as with any community, as with anything, there are going to be people who are not as nice. And the beauty of it is that it is very simple to just say, Thank you for letting me join in your game for today, but I don't think this is for me.
Mm-hmm.
Have a nice day.
Even
Have a
during
nice
the
game.
session, when, you and I have heard horror stories, if whatever's going on in the game or whatever behavior is happening is making you uncomfortable and you don't want to continue, you don't have to wait until the end of the session. You can just tell them, like, yeah, this isn't for me, and just, step away and go find some other folks who are within your wheelhouse.
It is a game.
It is a game, but, it's also a social commitment
it's a
in some
social-
ways.
yeah.
Because the dungeon master is spending time to create the game, usually.
And
The
you're
players
setting
are-
aside time to go play the game.
Yeah, the players are committing time to come and play in person or online. So, and I've felt this, I know you felt this sometime, there's that social commitment thing that once you started the ball rolling, you have to stay with it until it's done. And that's not true. Like you say, Lisa, it's a game. So if at any point, the number one thing I always ask my players at the end of a session, are you having fun? If you're not having fun and you haven't been having fun with a group or a game or whatever it is, maybe that group isn't for you, or maybe D&D isn't for you. I've had that with my significant other. D&D is just not their thing, and it's probably never gonna be, and I'm okay with that, and so are they.
Yeah, and, you can always try again another time.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really... The barrier to entry is practically non-existent. It's mostly just imagined.
There's lots of groups who are very welcoming, looking for players, and then once you're in, we'll espouse now, because we are dungeon masters, there are people who do D&D good and bad, but it's not good and bad in, like, you didn't optimize your character properly or you didn't do a certain thing in the game. It's when you're rude or when you're a bad, you're disrespectful at a table.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at with my
Etiquette
earlier comment.
is-
Well, yeah, it's very much like...
there's an
It's etiquette as with
thing
any
you do.
social interaction. It's like with anything, you want to be, nice to be around. You want to make sure that, like, you're having fun, the people that you're around are having fun. And sometimes certain behavior impedes that.
Yeah, but specifically speaking to D&D etiquette,
Yeah.
there's the etiquette of, okay, you're a player and you're in a group that you like. The thing that's important to everybody is keeping things moving. So you don't want the dungeon master or you, whoever else, to have to stop and look up the rules on how, does your ranger stuff work or what do any spells do. So ahead of the session, like, know what your stuff does. You don't need to know what every class does, but you don't even need to know, if you're a ranger, what all the ranger subclasses and what they can all do. Just know what your character's supposed to do. So when it's your turn in combat or when it comes decision time in the game, you know what you have available, and you're able to make those decisions quickly. So beyond just being respectful, which we'll always advocate in any situation, just like, if you're a player, know your stuff. And beyond that, don't be that guy where you're just kind of wanting to hog the spotlight. And I think both you and I have seen this with groups of less and more experienced players.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to that bar
of the what's it called, the main characteritis.
Either someone who's very outgoing naturally, who may be a theater kid like you, or someone who has been playing D&D and they already know their stuff and they already know what kind of character they want to play, versus either less experienced folks or just less outgoing individuals. They either sometimes they want to, just in their minds, they want to take the spotlight because they like to be in the spotlight and be the center of attention. And other times, it's subconscious, where they know what their character wants to do, so they take the actions to do it, whereas the other folks may not be as confident to take that step. And in those cases, sometimes it's up to the dungeon master, sometimes it's up to the player to see that they're doing it, to sometimes just step back and let the other players kind of take the fore, and maybe turn to the other player who's kind of quieter and be like, what would you do?
Yeah, and I think that's something that sort of balancing out engagement and making sure that everybody is being able to play the game and not just sitting at the table. That's as much everybody at the table's job as it is the DM's. There are some people who, if you ask them, they think, oh, it's not my fault that my character is doing all of this. And it's always, those people are always the ones who are like, oh, it's not me, it's my character.
It's what my character would do.
It's what my character would do. We'll get into that. Once we, the next thing I want to get into is role playing. The next thing
you can't use it's what my character would do as an excuse for poor social etiquette that bleeds out of the game and then just starts to make you insufferable in real life.
Yeah. But that's essentially what I was going to say is you can't put the onus solely on the DM for you hogging the attention, and then feeling like, oh, my storyline is the only one that's progressing. Well, it's because you're not letting anybody else speak and you're not letting anybody else have a storyline. That's something where, okay, if you think that, oh, well, the story is just going in the direction of my backstory or whatever, talk to your DM. Double check, make sure that that's what it is. Talk to the other players. If somebody else comes to you and says, hey, you're kind of hogging the spotlight, you're kind of getting you're not letting anybody else speak at the table.
Who want the spotlight.
Right. You're not letting anybody else speak at the table. Be able to take that sort of feedback and critique and not take it personally. It's again, it's a game, it's a creative outlet, it's a social activity, so you have to, at a certain point, subscribe to normal social mores and social boundaries. I think that sort of dovetails well into the topic of role play specifically, because I think we've talked about now, as far as being a new player and getting into it mechanically. We can't really get into too much finding a group at all, because there are so many ways that you can find a group.
These are the two biggest ones right now, Roll20 or just online forums and a gaming store. That's usually it.
Or just pestering your friends.
If you don't have anyone else beyond just asking your friends.
Yeah, pester your friends for years and years until they finally break, and they're like, fine, we're gonna play this stupid dice game with you, Lisa. Oh. Wait. Did I? Okay.
Just pester your friends for years and just push them into the deep end of the pool, and eventually they'll run a game,
Yeah. Eventually either they'll run a game or they'll find somebody. Because that's what happened for me is I was pestering my friends, everybody with an ear. I'd be like, hey, don't play D&D? Don't play D&D? Do you know anybody who's going to play D&D? Anybody? Until eventually I was introduced to Varun, and now he can't shake me.
Yeah. And my philosophy of the Nike slogan, just do it. That was my advice as an experienced dungeon master. I'm like, how do you get started? How you do? Just do it.
Just play the game.
You just do it.
How do you play the game alone? I don't know. Write a novel. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So beyond the barrier of finding a group and then feeling like you need to know all the mechanics and
you don't.
The focus and trying to focus on that. There are a lot of people who their other biggest concern in going into the game is, oh, I don't know how to role play. I've never, and it's like, nobody's asking you to be an improv master. There is definitely a tangent to be had here about the effect of Critical Role and other live stream and podcast D&D games, but we can't get into that yet. No,
that's a whole episode by itself.
The only thing I will say on that before we get into the whole episode on it is just the idea of comparing yourself. But we'll get into that. As far as role-playing, that's something that when you're starting a game or you're joining a game that's already been going on for a while, you talk to the DM, you talk to the other players, and you find out what level of roleplay this game even subscribes to, because different groups play the game differently. I think one of the beauties of D&D is just how versatile it is. There are some groups that don't roleplay at all.
Like many Adventure League tables, just based on how it's structured, you don't get a chance to do a lot of role-playing, so it's all really mechanics and combat heavy.
Exactly.
Whereas
so
the last session we played in the game that I'm running, the homebrew game that I'm running, it was all roleplay.
Nice.
We barely rolled dice the entire session.
Nice. But most, if you go into your game store, your local game store, and try to join one of the games there, more than likely this is the kind of game that you're going to encounter, is something that's not super roleplay heavy and mostly battle heavy, and the only thing you really need to worry about is knowing how your character, class, and subclass works.
I think that's really what you need to know if you're going to be gaming with people you know or not, if it's Adventure League or not. Just know how your character works, because I don't think
I'm talking about as far as role playing though.
No, I know. But from the role playing perspective, so you have scores in Dungeons and Dragons. You have strength and dex and con, and those are your physical ones. And then you have wisdom, charisma, and intelligence. Those are your mental scores. When someone says they're going to lift a heavy rock, they just roll strength or athletics and they lift the rock or not, right? But when someone
they say they're going to seduce the dragon,
I'm going to seduce the barmaid, the dungeon master usually asks, okay, how do you seduce the barmaid? And you have to act it out, which I don't think is particularly fair, because sometimes some people want to play the charismatic character but may not be charismatic in real life, or may not know how to do that. So that's a decision on the group and the dungeon master on how to judge those sorts of things, because that's what the dice are there for, to roll, to use your skills, to have those things there. Because it could be a roleplay heavy group, but then someone new comes in and they're shy, they're just naturally shy. It might be an outlet for them to come out of their shell, or they may not, and the rest of the group should be respectful of that. Now if they come to you and they're they don't feel like they're going anywhere, then okay, as the dungeon master, then you can say, all right, these are some of the things that you can do. Look at all the other players and the stuff that they're kind of taking control of and they're role playing. But it shouldn't be a prerequisite. I don't think.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. It's what I'm basically trying to communicate is you don't need to worry so much about being a good role player or not. You don't need being a theater kid isn't a prerequisite for playing D&D.
It helps.
Being good,
it's not
of course it helps, but we're trying to assuage people's fears here. You don't need to be a master of improv or anything. Just, if you go into it with a character and you don't even know what that character's backstory is or, motivations are, you can work with your GM. You can ask for input from other people and ask, what do they think would be cool? What do you feel would be cool? And don't be... The beauty of the game is that there are certain things that are limited, but in other things there are no limitations. So all it is just an exercise in letting down that sort of barrier in your mind that makes you embarrassed.
Yep.
And just don't be embarrassed. Do the crazy weird thing.
Be silly. It's great to be silly.
Don't be afraid. Be silly or be dramatic or, play that high elf princess, do it. Do it.
Absolutely.
Play that high elf princess sorcerer who got kicked out of her family or whatever.
Describing a friend
Just
of
do
mine
it.
to the T.
Exactly. I mean, archetypes, if you're pulling from a video game, if you're literally if your character is just reskinned Princess Zelda or Link or
Gerald of
any
Rivia.
other
I've had that one happen.
or any other video game character or book character. You want to straight up just play Geralt of Rivia? Do it. But be prepared that it's going to go on a journey, and you're going to figure out, as part of like the things that happen in the story, the other people in your party, you're going to learn more about the character, you're going to learn about the things that you like in the game, and you're going to build on it. Just be prepared for it to change, and your and like go through an arc of sorts.
And to the inverse of that, don't be the guy, like, it's okay to show up at the table and not have a backstory and motivations, that's totally fine. But don't be the guy or gal or person that comes with no motivation, doesn't grow a motivation through playing the game, and then gets upset that your character doesn't get the spotlight, or uses that as an excuse to do, like, crazy destructive things in the game. And then just blame it on that's what my character would do, or that's my new motivation, when it wasn't there at all before. Because that's just a recipe to make everybody else at the table mad at you.
Yeah.
The being shitty part. The part where you may not feel like you have the spotlight, that's just like, you've got to make an effort. Even if it's the minimal effort, you got to be involved. Because D&D's pretty collaborative.
We have in one of our games a friend whose character is decidedly, his only motivation seems to be to keep himself and his familiar, his companion, his wolf companion, alive. And that's it. He doesn't want for anything. He just wants to protect him and his wolf. The reason why that works is because the person who plays that character isn't then turning around and being like, oh, why aren't I getting the spotlight? I don't know. And it's like, no, they're vibing. They're going with the flow.
They're totally fine just being on the sideline,
totally
just
fine.
watching
and
everything else
being
unfold.
Supportive and, chiming in with funny remarks when they need it, and being a part of combat, and it doesn't take away from their engagement, and so that works. But if they were the type of person who didn't present any motivations or any backstory or anything, and then also turned around and was like, why ain't I getting any attention? I was like, oh, you're not giving us anything to work with, bud.
Yep.
So if you're choosing, if you're making the character choice that your background is a mystery and you have a very simple motivation, which is to stay alive, like, just know that you're not.
It's
not that you're not going to get the.
That's a fine A. You need to get to B.
That's also a conversation for another day, because I think that's fine. Because I think, like, the rest of the party, especially in the specific context of this, I think there's so much already going on with everybody else in that party that they don't really need anything.
I'm saying in the being
in the general sense, though.
Is fine.
In the general sense, it's good to have some idea of who you are.
Yeah, being a static character, like I say, is totally fine if that's what you want to be. But if you're going to be like 5-10 sessions later, we haven't done anything, focusing on me, and there's no backstory for the DM to draw to create anything from, then that's, like, on you if you've gotten that far and you haven't given them anything.
Yeah, which isn't to say that 5 or 10 sessions and you can't, speak to your DM and say, hey, I have some ideas.
Yeah.
That's fine, but turning to your DM and saying, hey, why am I being ignored? That's not cool. That's not really the way to approach it. If you have been uninspired up until that point, that's perfectly fine. And you're just going with the flow and just dealing with the story as it comes along. That's a perfect way of playing the game. There's nothing wrong with that. And it works because of D&D's, like, collaborative sort of structure.
Read my mind. I was about to say.
Yeah, because it's a collaboration. So you don't have to be the center of attention. You don't have to be the one that motivates. You don't have to have some great big dramatic thing in your background that affects everybody, because somebody else in the party will have some great big dramatic
How
background
many of them
thing.
were? And The Hobbit, like, had a
Exactly.
backstory.
Yeah, no. Merry and Pippin were there just because, like, they just got wrapped into it, and then their sole, like, goal was to help Frodo. That's a very, very good example, Varun.
And yeah, speaking to, like, moving from, like, the singular backstory to the collaboration thing. Like, Dungeons & Dragons isn't an island. Adventure League kind of makes you kind of an island because you can jump from group to group.
We're going to talk about your salt about Adventure League on another day.
Another day. But in any sort of either homebrew or if you're running a module, any sort of continuing group, it's totally okay and even really friggin' awesome to have collaborative, like, stories. This is one thing I want to do with whatever next game I run. Have the players have a robust session 0, which we'll talk about more in depth when we talk about Dungeon Master stuff. Okay, does anybody want, like, a joined backstory? Do people want to be brothers, or do people want to be soldiers who fought together?
I was gonna say something stupid.
What?
I was gonna say reincarnated soulmates. Do you want to get real tropey? I mean, we'll talk about relationships in D&D maybe on another day because some things have come up.
We'll dig into that, but we can use our, the campaign that we're playing in as the example of, maybe it doesn't start at the beginning, but it can evolve through the game itself, where people's storylines become entwined.
Yeah, but if we're talking about backstories specifically, I think, so the very first time I, like, played D&D was not with Varun, actually. It was with a group of people from the college I went to. We had a Halloween party, and there was this one girl who, I'm gonna be honest, not a lot of us super liked her. Like, we weren't super close friends with her, but she was the only person who was a DM. and she offered to DM for us because, again, I would not stop talking about D&D, and I forced all my friends who had no interest in playing D&D into playing D&D. So for Halloween, we were throwing a little get-together. She brought her stuff, she brought the books. In the week leading up to it, she met with each one of us and, like, asked us to at least, like, pick a race and a class and just, like, any sort of vague details. And 2 of the people had separately decided to be Dragonborn. And then when we got to the party and, like, as we were setting up the game and sort of introducing our characters, those 2 people turned to each other and went, "Do you want to be brother and sister?"
Awesome.
And, like, it's just, it felt so natural. It felt so right. It just, ooh. Oh, man. It was really wholesome. It was great. And so, just like that, people who, like, I don't know if it's a consequence of those 2 people being screenwriters, but,
you have good instincts.
I mean, yeah, we all had taken, like, the same screenwriting classes and the same, like, film production classes. So also, yes, hi, hello, I'm a film major, so if I start...
I am not.
No, but you're a nerd.
Oh,
so,
yeah. I'm a different type of nerd, though.
Yeah. I'm like a nerd with a degree in being a nerd. But yeah, in that game, it just came very naturally for, like, we were trying to work out, like, specifics in our backstories, and it was a one-shot, so it didn't really matter, but we were working out, like, specifics in our backstory, and they just turned to each other and were like, "Do you want to be brother and sister? That would be really funny."
Sometimes character creation is the most fun of those sessions that just kind of get thrown together.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I will be completely honest. We played exactly nothing of that game because we all got entirely too inebriated to get past introducing ourselves to each other. And I am the most guilty of it, I'm going to be honest.
I wasn't there for that one, but I was there for one of those.
Oh boy. Oh, you were there for a different Halloween than one. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But that one was already like after I'd already had like experience with the game and been playing the game for like a year at that point.
That'll be another story episode. Drunken
Oh
D.
god.
D and drunk.
Drunken D&D with like 10 players?
Oh, it must have been at least.
At least. There were at least 10 people at that table.
You want to talk about chaos?
Oh god, it was good. It was good. I'm thinking of like depending on how things work out with the world, I might have to have a part 2 to that.
Mm-hmm.
A sequel. But yes, backstories, building out your backstory. You don't have to, get there to session 1 already with the whole intricate backstory written up in, over, 4
Don't write a
pages
book.
and 12-point font. Don't be me.
Especially depending on who your dungeon master is, you're gonna be
Yeah.
real sad if your character that you spend so much time coming up and creating motivations and creating a backstory before it dies in the first session.
Yeah. Or just that stuff never comes up because your DM is just putting you through a gauntlet of dungeons and it's just a dungeon crawl.
And just ignoring backstory altogether.
Dungeon crawl games are fun and can be a lot of fun, but I got very lucky that I didn't really discuss it with Varun before joining his game, but I just gave him several paragraphs about my character in beautifully edited written prose.
I weaponized it.
I got lucky that Varun is very much the kind of DM that uses that.
You give me stuff, I will not ignore it.
Oh god, I actually kind of hate your penchant. I hate it, but I also love it, how good you are at taking everything that I've given you and just turning it against me. It's really good. It's really fun. It's what I live for. It's what got me into this game.
It was. I try not to do it just you. We've got every other player.
Oh yeah, no. It's just that I've given you a lot to work with. I've given you a lot to work with.
And it's come up and hit you in the feels.
It's great.
Which is my goal. That's my goal as a dungeon master, to hit you in the feelings so that
you're engaged. That's how that happens. You become engaged. You want to interact in that world if you feel that there are consequences to things that happen to your character / you in the past. I think depending on the DM, it can be done really well. But also, I think
it can be
note,
spontaneous in the game, and I think what we want to get through to newer players is don't be afraid of that. Your dungeon master will love that.
Yeah.
If you want to be brothers with someone else in the campaign, I do that because my brother actually plays D&D with me. Or you want to get into a romance with one of the other players and they're receptive, in game, totally. You want to have a family and children that the dungeon master can dangle in front of you, so much damsels
like a carrot in front of a horse. But I think as we're pulling up on an hour, 45 minutes here, I think basically what we want to get across to new players or people who want to get into it or have gotten into it recently but are very hesitant, I think ultimately, of these things, the mechanics of it, the finding a group, the roleplay aspect. What it all comes down to is communicating with whoever is going to be running your game and the other people who are going to participate in your game. And it's going to be something that we're going to we're going to start sounding like a broken record eventually, but really communication is so key.
Communication is the bedrock of all of this. Communication helps you
reach out. It's the bedrock of society.
It's you reaching out to your friends to play a game, or reaching out to a new group online or something to play a game. It's reaching out to the DM to say, hey, I want more of a spotlight, and give them some stuff. Or reaching out to another player to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this thing that you did. Or, hey, do you want to be in-game married?
Yeah.
None of that happens unless you, are open.
Yeah, I mean, those are all. It's funny because those over time, you're gonna get better at that aspect. As with anything, it comes with practice, it comes with time. You're not going to walk into it being a masterful, the perfect table guest. You're not going to walk into it being the perfect player. It comes with time, and you just have to show that you are teachable. Yeah, I think that's really our point for today. I mean,
players.
Yeah, that's our advice to players and our like sort of primer on what this is going to be. These conversations that we're going to be having.
All right. So I think we'll cut it here, and the next episode will be flip the script 180. We're going to be talking from the perspective of dungeon masters, people running a game, and all of the back-end mechanical stuff that goes into that, but also the social mores that go into that.
We'll get into that on the next episode. Until
but yes,
then,
if you've listened this long to this first episode, we love you and we thank you, and we really hope you listen to the next one.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Yes,
I don't know.
there you go. Call it out. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Tell your friends. I like you. We'll get to know each other. Buy me dinner first. Oops All Dragons is a group effort. Our show is edited by Noel Hernandez, our theme was composed by Brendan Lyons, and our logo art is by As If On Cue. Links to more of their work and their social media will be in